it's Wread, back to share another chapter of Charlotte's Web, written by E.B. White. Today we're going to be reading chapter 5, and we're going to be meeting a new character. If you recall from chapter 4, Wilbur was feeling kind of lonely. He had escaped in chapter 3, he'd come back, and he's kind of looking for some new friends. He hasn't really made any friends in the barn with the goose and the sheep and the cows. So let's find out what happens with Wilbur in his search for a new friend. So as usual, sit back, relax, and get comfy, and get ready to be a listener. Chapter 5, Charlotte. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty, his mind was full, and when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's kind of hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. Pigs don't wear watches, and they also can't tell time. Even at midnight, there's usually something in the barn stirring. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing at some wood in a grain bin. Templeton's teeth, and if you recall, Templeton is a rat. Templeton's teeth scraped the wood loudly, and it made quite a racket. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying other people's property? Why can't he just go to sleep like other decent animals? The second time Wilbur woke up, he heard the goose turning on her nest and clucking to herself. "What time is it?" Wilbur whispered to the goose. Probably about 11:30, said the goose. "Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur?" "Too many things are on my mind," Wilbur said. "Well," said the goose, "that's not my trouble. I have nothing on my mind, but I have too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while you were sitting on 8 eggs? "No," replied Wilbur. "I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take for a goose to hatch an egg?" Approximately 30 days, all told," answered the goose. "But I cheat a little bit. On warm afternoons, I just pull a little bit of straw over the eggs and then I go out for a walk." Wilbur yawned, and he went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard a voice again saying, "I'll be a friend to you." So remember, in chapter 4, he had heard a voice coming from somewhere he couldn't tell. "Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke up and he listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless, and even, finally, the goose was quiet. Overhead on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting, the horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and gone off somewhere on an errand. And the only sound was a slight scraping noise from the roof of the barn, kind of where the weather vane was. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for the light. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. A gleam is like a shine. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under one wing. And then he could see the sheep and the lambs. Then the sky lightened. "Oh, beautiful day. It's here at last. Today I shall find my new friend." Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge. He stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he'd have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of John by using his voice. But he couldn't think of another way to locate his mysterious new friend, who was nowhere to be seen. So Wilbur cleared his throat. "Attention, please," he said in a loud, firm voice. "Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make him or herself known by giving me an appropriate signal or sign?" Wilbur paused to listen. All the other animals lifted their heads and they stared at him. Wilbur blushed a little bit. But he was determined to get in touch with this new unknown friend. "Attention, please," he said again. "I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me where you are if you are my friend." The sheep looked at each other in disgust. "Stop your nonsense, Wilbur," said the oldest sheep. "If you have a friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest, and the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody in the morning before they're ready." "How can you be sure your friend is even an early riser?" "I beg everyone's pardon," whispered Wilbur. "I didn't mean to be objectionable," meaning rude. No way. He lay down meekly in the manure facing the door, meaning he kind of felt a little embarrassed and was kind of hiding himself. He did not know it, but his friend was very near. And the old sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with the slop for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out. He ate everything in a hurry and he licked through the whole trough. The sheep moved off down the lane and the goose waddled down behind them, pulling on grass. And just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard that thin voice again that had addressed him the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped up to his feet. "Salu what?" he cried. "Salutations," said the voice again. "What are they? And where are you?" screamed Wilbur. Please tell me where you are, and what are salutations?" "Salutations are greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's kind of a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. I'm looking and waving." At last, Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a huge spider web. Hanging from the top of the web, head down, was a large, gray, you guessed it, spider. This is what Wilbur saw. He looks very excited to meet his new friend. Now, as you can tell, my Charlotte is quite bigger than Wilbur's Charlotte. She was about the size of a gumdrop, so like that big. Something you'd plop in your mouth. Not that we'd eat a spider. She had 8 legs, and she was waving at Wilbur with one of them in a friendly greeting. "See me now?" she said. "Oh, yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations." "Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" asked Wilbur eagerly. "Charlotte A. Kavitaka. But you can just call me Charlotte." "I think you're so beautiful," said Wilbur. "Well, I am pretty," replied Charlotte. "There's no denying that." Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish that I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me. Why can't you? Asked the pig. I'm right here. Yes, but I'm nearsighted, which means she can't see things that are far away. I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, not so good in others. So watch me wrap up this fly. A fly that had been crawling along in Wilbur's trough had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was all tangled in her sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying to break loose and free itself. First, said Charlotte, I dive at him. I plunge head first towards the fly. And she did. And she dropped a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end, her bottom, which is where their threads come from. And then next I wrap him up, and she grabbed the fly. She threw her little jets of silk around it, and she rolled it over and over and over and over using her legs until the fly couldn't move. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he felt very sorry for this one. I can kind of feel what Wilbur might be feeling. Fortunately, Charlotte tells us why she does this. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Although he detested flies, he was sorry for this one. There, said Charlotte. Now, I'll knock him out so he'll be more comfortable. She bit the fly. And now, she said, he can't feel a thing. He'll make a perfect breakfast for me. You mean you eat flies? Wilbur asked. Certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, midges, daddy longlegs, centipedes, mosquitoes, and crickets, pretty much anything that carelessly gets caught in my web. I have to live, don't I? Why, yes, of course, said Wilbur. Do they taste good? Oh, delicious, said Charlotte. Of course, I don't really eat them. I drink them. I drink their blood. Oh. I love blood, said Charlotte, and her pleasant, thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. Don't say that, groaned Wilbur. Please don't say things like that. Why not? It's true. And I have to say what is true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of bugs and flies, but it's just the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or another, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper, and her mother before her was a trapper. All of my family have been trappers, way back thousands of years. It's a miserable inheritance, said Wilbur gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was so bloodthirsty. Yeah, it is, said Charlotte. But I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did, and it was clever of her too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole. I like that Charlotte taught us more about spiders, because I did not know that about spiders. It's cruel, replied Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of his position. Well, you can't talk, said Charlotte. You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever, or I go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore, said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, Do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous that they would destroy the earth and wipe everything else out? Really? Said Wilbur. Well, I wouldn't want that to happen. So perhaps your web is pretty good after all. The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling to herself. There's lots of things that Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. I'm wondering what she means by that. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself up a bit and she poked at her eggs and a little further under her so that she'd give all the full warmth of her body and soft feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur laid down and he closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought in the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend all right. But what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, scheming, and bloodthirsty. Everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she's pretty and, of course, clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and the fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he was able to discover that he had been mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her bold and cruel exterior, she had a kind heart. And she would prove to be a loyal and true friend to the very end. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 5. Thanks for being listeners, and tune in next time for chapter 6.